You might think that $500 is pretty steep for a console these days, but it could be much worse. Here are the 10 most expensive home consoles of all time at launch, adjusted for inflation. I'll explain my workings at the end of the video if you want to see how it was all calculated. Picture the scene. It's 1995 and the big buzz around E3 is about the SEGA SATURN and Sony PlayStation finally coming to America.
You are approaching Saturn.
SEGA was winning in Japan and hoped to bring that momentum to the United States. The Saturn was due to launch in the fall, but SEGA took to the stage at E3 to say that not only would the console be available at $399, it would also be available right now. In the United States, that is. Sony's head of development Steve Race then took to the stage, simply said,
$299.
The Sony PlayStation was $100 cheaper than its direct competitor. But when you adjust that to today's money, it still comes in at around $509. That story is one of the true mic drop moments in gaming and also rained on Sega's parade, but more on that later. In at 9, the Xbox 360. Honestly, I didn't expect to see it in this list because of how affordable that console would eventually become with various bundles and hardware revisions, but when it launched in 2005, the full Xbox 360 package cost $399, with the cheaper core package costing just $299. The Xbox 360 package was pretty comprehensive though. It included the console, a detachable 20GB hard drive, wireless controller, headset, cables, a faceplate, an Xbox Live Silver membership, as well as the fangled Xbox 360 media remote control. Adjusted for 2020, that rounds out to about $531, which is a little hard to swallow, especially when you consider how many Red Ring of Death issues eventually popped up with that console. Hot off the heels of the success of the Xbox 360's enormous sales figures, Xbox had a rough go with the launch of its successor, the Xbox One, due to a string of bad PR about its rumored always online functionality, DRM, its over-the-top messaging about TV integration, lack of emphasis on gaming, and then its price point. An eye-watering $499, which is about $556 in 2020 money. Unlike the 360, which offered a cheaper launch package alternative, Xbone only had one, which contained a 500GB console, one controller, and everyone's favorite peripheral, the Kinect. Funnily enough, they dropped the Kinect package after 8 months. I'm not going to dwell on the Saturn here too much, as I already spilled the beans on its launch price, $399. Today, that'd be roughly $680. Even though Sega beat PlayStation to the US market by a good few months, unfortunately it didn't have the games to capitalize on the head start. When the PlayStation launched in September 1995, it sold more units in 2 days than the Saturn had in its 5 months on the market. We'll talk a little bit more about the Atari 2600 in a minute, but the console's successor, the more powerful 5200, makes a little appearance on this list first. Releasing in 1982 at $269, that's $724 in today's money, the 5200 didn't really set the world on fire. Yes, it had better graphics than the 2600, but it was unable to play the vast majority of 2600 games until they released an adapter the following year. Another reminder why backwards compatibility is super important. Riding high after the PlayStation 2's enormous success, and with its direct competitor, the Xbox 360 already out, all eyes were on Sony to see what it could pull out of the bag for the PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, the attention the PS3 got was for all the wrong reasons. The console cost $599 for the 60GB model, that's $772 in today's money. The reason? Sony was way too ambitious. The technology inside the PS3, including its infamous Cell microprocessor CPU, made it expensive to manufacture, pushing the price up. However, Sony was remarkably forward-thinking in being the first home console to adopt the Blu-ray player, and thanks to some price cuts and well-received first-party titles, it managed to pull it all back. Back in the early 70s, if you had a home console, you'd only be able to play one game on it, meaning that developing game consoles was frankly not really worth it if you wanted to keep up with the ever-expanding video game industry. It wasn't until developers began to experiment with microprocessors in their consoles that you could play multiple games at home on one machine. The Atari 2600 launched in 1977 at $199, $853 in today's money, and it had a slow start, even requiring some cash injections to keep Atari afloat.
It's the 2600 from ATARI.
Eventually though, the console began to gather steam, and when Atari licensed Space Invaders and released it in 1980, console sales quickly began to rise. But still, $800 is a lot of money. Alright, now we're getting into the big money. Mattel, yes, the Barbie and Hot Wheels toy manufacturer, had a line of handheld electronic games in the 70s, and after seeing Atari release the 2600 in 1977, began work on its own home console, the INTELLIVISION. Launching for $299 in 1979, that's $1,070 in today's money, the INTELLIVISION's initial release was pretty slow, as it only launched in select markets with 4 games, with one of them being literally a game about maths. The INTELLIVISION eventually found its footing by marketing how advanced it was compared to Atari, with higher resolution graphics and better sound. Time Magazine's 1993 Product of the Year is in at number 2, the 3DO. It launched at $699, that is around $1,257 in today's money. Yes, you heard me right. Already it was super expensive, and unfortunately for the 3DO console, because the 3DO company were making tweaks to it all the way down to the wire, it launched with only one game. One. And that game was called Crash and Burn. You can't make it up. The Neo Geo Multi-Video System, an arcade machine with a bunch of different games inside it compared to just one, launched back in 1990. It was a super powerful system, and due to the versatility of being able to swap ROM cartridges and artwork, it became very successful in arcades. Seeing an opportunity, manufacturer SNK developed the Neo Geo Advanced Entertainment System, what a mouthful, and rented them out to places like bars, restaurants, and game rental stores. Demand to bring the arcade experience to the home rose, and the Neo Geo was released as a home console in 1991 for $649. That's $1,290 in 2020 money. The console was super powerful for its time, but the price of it and its games, which would retail for over $100 each, meant that, funnily enough, it never really caught on. Of course, now the Neo Geo and many of its games are collector's items among arcade enthusiasts. So there we are, the top 10 most expensive home consoles adjusted for inflation. I used usinflationcalculator.com and rounded up the numbers for ease. Thanks for watching, and for more on the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, make sure to keep your eyes peeled to GameSpot.